Last week, Congress released a second loan program in order to bolster businesses and revive the economy. It provides about $484 billion for small businesses, for hospitals, and for additional COVID-19 testing.
But black business owners say funds need to be earmarked specifically for African American firms to ensure that their companies survive this pandemic. Big name companies like Ruth Chris Steakhouse, the Potbelly Sandwich Shop, and even the Los Angeles Lakers basketball team were able to get access to money, while smaller business owners said they couldn't get their applications through. Some 40% of revenues from black-owned businesses are in the top 5 most vulnerable sectors, including retail, leisure, and hospitality. That is according to a report from the McKinsey Institute. And joining us tonight is public speaker, filmmaker, journalist, and gentrification expert King Williams. Welcome to the show, Mr. Williams.
Thank you guys for having me.
Glad to have you here. There are about 2.6 million black-owned businesses around. In a recent article in the Black Star, you explain how 50%, half of black businesses could get wiped out completely due to COVID-19. Could you explain your rationale?
Yes, so one of the reasons being is that majority of our black-owned businesses in Georgia are part-time businesses. The majority of those are headed by women. Of the businesses that we have in the state of Georgia right now, most of them that are black-owned typically make under $500,000 in revenue. Most of those right now, from my research anyway, has not been recipients of the PPP loans, nor have they received any state aid. For also a lot of black businesses in the state, we have this other issue of generally underfunded businesses. And so our underfunded businesses are in our communities in which that need the cash flow. And right now, the economic base just isn't there because they're afraid to spend.
So the president of the Illinois Black Chamber of Commerce, which represents 144,000 businesses, calls the phenomena pandemic racism. Is that something that you would classify it as?
I wouldn't call it pandemic racism. What I would think, though, is that the pandemic has revealed how racism has factored into the overall financing and financial opportunities of black businesses.
Well, let's talk about gentrification, which to me kind of goes hand in hand with this situation. I lived in Atlanta for a great many years and saw the whole Martin Luther King corridor change from a black-owned corridor to something that was owned by somebody else. The West End, which was primarily a black neighborhood, now it's become fashionable for young white people to move in there, and the prices have gone up. Do you see the real estate dynamic changing because of COVID-19, not only in Atlanta, but in other cities?
It's happening all over in the cities. What we've seen in the last 20 years, especially the last 10, is the largest redistribution of wealth in the United States since the invention of the federal highways in the 1950s. And in the case of Atlanta, we have a couple things going on. We have a lot of in-migration from within the state, regional in-migration, as well as national in-migration. So there's a more people who just need to be in the state or need to be closer to facilities. And we also have this issue of black disinvestment in our neighborhoods for a long time. There's a thing I worked on in my documentary. We talk about this issue of black flight, where the black middle and upper class actually left black neighborhoods. Some of it was generally valid, but that has created a groundswell for places like the West End, like you mentioned, to be gentrified, and most of the black places around Metro Atlanta.
So is there anything we can do about all of this?
Yes, so there's a couple things. In fighting gentrification, the biggest thing we're going to need right now is we're going to need a large number of moratoriums on rental assistance or rental abatements right now for our renting population. For our homeownership program, one thing we're doing right now in the city of Atlanta, we just need more funding, is this issue of Invest Atlanta, which is our investment arm. They are funding both businesses and they are funding people who are going to be first-time homeowners. We just need to ramp that type of program up in a larger capacity, as well as having general information in the marketplace on homeowners who may be targets for gentrification, like a neighborhood that I live in.
And when you talk about building up black neighborhoods, I noticed that the Bankhead area, which has traditionally been a black area, the rapper T.I. grew up in that area, and he's reinvesting in that community and getting into the real estate market. Do you see more of that happening around the country?
Around the country, no, unfortunately. But in Atlanta, yes, we have a general sense of pride in where we come from, and there is a reinvestment of athletes and entertainers who've grown up in Atlanta to slowly either buy businesses or open up their places for businesses or homeownership within Atlanta. I don't know if that necessarily is scalable in other places, just because their business and their economic base is so stratified.
So for those of us, our viewers out there who may not be as familiar with your work, can you tell us a little bit about your documentary and some of the work that you've been doing?
Yes, I have a documentary on gentrification called The Atlanta Way. For years, I would do many short films on it, and now in 2020, this August, there will be a full-length version of the film. And then I also worked on another documentary intersecting with gentrification that's on PBS right now, which I was an associate producer on, called East Lake Meadows. And it's the study of how one public housing project was destroyed and renovated, and how that renovation model became a national standard on redevelopment of communities.
How did you get interested in this topic?
I've grown up in Atlanta most of my life. And so I've always grown up in gentrifying areas. It wasn't until I went to college that I found answers, and then that answers prompted me to start getting into film.
Well, and a gentleman by the name of Spike Lee may have had a little bit of an influence on you as well. Can you tell us about your relationship with Spike?
Spike is really cool. I actually met Spike. Well, I want to preface this. I got my internship through Spike Lee through Twitter. I created a Twitter campaign with a friend of mine from Georgia State, and we built a campaign over 9 weeks that was building myself up as an intern to work for him for free. We utilized everyone I knew, from teachers to residents to people who see me doing documentary work, and everyone on my behalf would tweet, email, call, direct mail Spike Lee on behalf of me to just be his intern. And that turned into the internship I got with Spike Lee. Spike eventually took me on, and then that allowed me to get into the film industry and learn a lot more about the film industry. And so Spike has always been a great reference point for me, and somebody I still have huge admiration for till this day.
Well, he's done so much for the film industry, the black film industry, and so much for Atlanta itself. I want to ask you this: Tyler Perry building his studio there, and how important that has been for the community.
It's been really interesting. And the thing about Tyler Perry is that there are two camps of Tyler Perry. 80% of the people love him. Black people love him in Atlanta for what he's done in that community. Fort McPherson was a former Confederate Army base that was built during the Civil War. And Tyler Perry, now being the sole owner of that, well, 80% of that property now, has really turned the reputation around of that area. There's still a long way to go in the communities around the area, but Tyler is slowly starting to get people the opportunities who normally would not have them in the film industry. And so for everyone working in film, Tyler has essentially been like the lighthouse for people who want to kind of eventually either be like Tyler Perry or work for him.
All right, so King Williams, thank you so much. I'm very much looking forward to seeing your documentary. We thank you for being on the program. We wish you well. Please come back and see us again.
Thank you for having me.